The government just revealed footage they should never have released. May 8, 2026. The Pentagon just released 160 UFO files at war.gov/UFO. Apollo astronauts, pilot footage, technology no human can replicate. The president's reaction: what the hell is going on? The Bible answered this question 2,000 years ago. Sign 1. What the government just released. I need you to hear what the president and the Pentagon said about them. Here's Trump on Truth Social. As for my promise to you, the Department of War has released the first tranche of the UFO/UAP files to the public for their review and study. In an effort for complete and maximum transparency, it was my honor to direct my administration to identify and provide government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, and unidentified flying objects. Whereas previous administrations have failed to be transparent on this subject, with these new documents and videos, the people can decide for themselves what the hell is going on. Have fun and enjoy. And here's what the Pentagon added. Because the Pentagon statement tells you the institutional posture behind the presidential showmanship. The American people have asked for more transparency on these topics, and President Trump is delivering. While past administrations sought to discredit or dissuade the American people, President Trump is focused on providing maximum transparency to the public, who can ultimately make up their own minds about the information contained in these files. Two institutions, the presidency and the Pentagon, releasing 80 years of classified footage and telling America, you figure it out. Now, here's what they released, because the files behind the quotes are what makes the quotes significant. We're looking at a screen. The URL, war.gov/UFO. The first page loads, and what appears is not a single file. It is an archive, 160-plus records spanning 8 decades. The earliest files date to the 1940s, the era of flying disc reports, when commercial pilots and military personnel first began documenting objects in American airspace that did not match any known aircraft. The most recent files include encounters from active-duty military pilots, footage captured on infrared targeting systems, radar data showing objects performing maneuvers that would destroy any human pilot under the G-forces involved. And here's the detail about the footage that most people scrolling through the archive will not pause to examine. Because the footage is not just visual, it is instrumented, infrared, radar, satellite, multiple sensor platforms capturing the same object simultaneously from different angles. The footage cannot be dismissed as camera artifacts or optical illusions, because the instruments that captured it do not hallucinate. Radar does not have an imagination. Infrared does not experience lens flare. When multiple independent sensor systems capture the same anomalous object performing the same impossible maneuver at the same timestamp. That is data, not speculation. Data. But here's what the release does not include, and the absence is the tell. No smoking gun, no definitive "this is alien technology" declaration, no confirmed wreckage, no bodies, no reverse engineering confirmation. Representative Eric Burleson, one of the most vocal members of Congress on UAP transparency, called the initial drop a teaser. The question no one is asking. Now here's what everyone is asking. What are they? Where do they come from? What do they want? The media is asking. Congress is asking. The public is asking. The Pentagon created a website for the asking. And the President of the United States asked, what the hell is going on? But here's what almost no one is asking. And the silence on this question is the most dangerous gap in the entire conversation. What does the Bible say about non-human intelligences? And that is the most important question of all. Because if Scripture has already addressed this category, if God has already revealed what non-human beings exist, what they look like, how they operate, and what agenda drives the ones who rebelled against Him, then we have a framework for interpreting the footage. We do not have to accept the government's definition of not human. We do not have to swallow whatever narrative the media constructs around the files. We can test it against what we already know is true. Everyone is asking the question. Almost no one is consulting the one source that has been documenting non-human intelligences for 3,500 years. Because the Bible is not silent about this topic. The Bible is filled with it. But the question is just the setup. The answer, what the Bible actually says about non-human beings, how many categories exist, what they look like, how they operate, and which ones have an agenda that should terrify every person who is not grounded in Scripture, is what every person watching the government footage needs before they form a single opinion about what they are seeing. Category 1. Angels, the messengers. Now, here's Category 1, and I need you to understand the scale before we examine the specifics. Because the biblical universe is not a two-category universe, it is not just God and humans. The biblical universe is teeming with non-human intelligences, created beings, commissioned by God, operating in dimensions adjacent to ours, interacting with the physical world in ways the government is only now beginning to document. We're in a Roman prison cell, 1st century A.D. The Apostle Peter is chained between two guards, sleeping, sentenced to execution in the morning. And in the middle of the night, a light fills the cell. A non-human intelligence appears, strikes Peter on the side to wake him. The chains fall off his wrists. The iron gate of the prison opens by itself. And Peter walks out, past guards, through locked doors, into the street. A non-human intelligence entered a physical space, interacted with physical objects, broke physical chains, and opened a physical gate. Documented in Acts 12. Not metaphor, not vision. Physical intervention by a non-human being in a guarded facility. The most common non-human beings in Scripture are angels. The Hebrew word is malak, messenger. Created beings, not eternal like God, but made by Him to serve His purposes. Psalm 103, verses 20 to 21. Bless the Lord, ye His angels, that excel in strength, that do His commandments, hearkening unto the voice of His word. Bless ye the Lord, all ye His hosts, ye ministers of His, that do His pleasure. Excel in strength. These are not decorative figures on greeting cards. These are powerful, commissioned agents who carry out God's commands. They move between heaven and earth. They interact with the physical world, and there are millions of them. Hebrews 12:22. But ye are come unto Mount Sion, and unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels. An innumerable company, more than can be counted. The government calls them non-human intelligences, and acts as if they have discovered a new category. The Bible has been documenting their existence, their movements, their appearances, their interactions with human beings, for 3.5 millennia. But the messengers are just Category 1. Category 2 is where the biblical descriptions start to sound like the footage the government just released. Because the beings Ezekiel saw do not look like anything on earth. Category 2. The throne guardians, cherubim and seraphim. Now here's Category 2. And this is the description that should stop every person who watched the government footage and assumed they were looking at something the Bible never anticipated. We're standing at the river Chebar, Babylon, 6th century BC. A priest named Ezekiel, taken from Jerusalem against his will, living in exile among the captives, is about to see something that will defy every word in his vocabulary. The sky opens, and what descends is not an angel in the form the Bible has described before. What descends is something Ezekiel has never seen, something he cannot name, something so far outside human experience that the language he uses is stacked with approximations. The likeness of, the appearance of, because Ezekiel does not have words for what is in front of him. Ezekiel 1:5-6, 16. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and every one had 4 faces, and every one had. And here's the biblical precedent that proves non-human intelligences have already intervened in human history at the physical level. Because the precedent is in Genesis, and the precedent changes everything. Genesis 6:1-4. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. The sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, non-human intelligences interacting with humanity at the physical level, not just appearing, not just observing, interacting, producing offspring. The Nephilim, a hybrid category that was never supposed to exist. And the interaction produced corruption so total that God sent the flood to cleanse the earth of the result. The precedent tells you something the disclosure narrative will never include. Non-human intelligences have already intervened in human history. The Bible records it. The intervention did not bring enlightenment. It brought corruption. It brought judgment. And it required a global reset to undo the damage. The government is calling these phenomena non-human intelligence and leaving the interpretation to the public. The Bible names the categories: angels, faithful servants, cherubim and seraphim, throne guardians, and the fallen, the third who rebelled, who can disguise themselves as light, who have intervened before, and whose agenda has never changed. Category 4. Demons, the ground-level operators. Now, here's Category 4, and this is the category that connects the biblical framework directly to the contact experiences being reported in UAP encounters. Because the fallen angels, the principalities and powers of Ephesians 6, operate in the heavenlies, in the atmosphere, in the high places. But Scripture describes another category of non-human intelligence that operates at the human level, on the ground, in the room, in the person: demons. We're standing on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, 1st century AD, a region called the Gadarenes, rocky terrain, tombs carved into the hillside, burial caves, dark, isolated. The air is dry. The ground is littered with broken chains, iron links snapped like thread. And living among the tombs, a man, naked, screaming. The community has tried to restrain him with chains and fetters. They cannot hold him. He howls day and night. and he is not alone inside his own body. Mark 5:6-9. But when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice, and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God, that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many. And here's what this single encounter reveals about how demons operate. Because 6 characteristics visible across this passage and 3 other encounters in the New Testament should change how every person watching this evaluates what the government is calling non-human intelligence. Characteristic 1, they recognized Jesus immediately. What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? The demons knew exactly who Jesus was. They did not need to be told. They possessed supernatural knowledge. Knowledge about the identity of Christ that the human religious leaders of the same era were still debating. The Pharisees could not decide if Jesus was the Messiah. The demons had no doubt. Non-human intelligences with accurate theological knowledge that exceeded the understanding of the most educated humans of their time. And they knew more about Jesus than the Pharisees did. And here's why that matters for the disclosure narrative. Because the entities described in UAP contact experiences consistently demonstrate knowledge that exceeds the experiencer's own understanding. Information they should not have. Details about the person's life. Theological claims about humanity's origin and destiny. The knowledge is real. The question is not whether the entities know things. The question is where the knowledge comes from and what agenda it serves. Category 5, the Watchers, the surveillance beings. Now here's Category 5. And this is the category that should change how every person watching this understands the most consistent behavior documented in UAP encounters. Because across 8 decades of military reports, from the 1940s nuclear site overflights to the Navy pilot footage released on May 8, one behavior appears more frequently than any other. Not attack, not communication, not abduction, surveillance, objects hovering over military installations, objects pacing aircraft without engaging, objects monitoring nuclear weapons sites, specifically nuclear sites, documented since the earliest days of the atomic age. Watching, observing, not interfering. Watching. And here's the biblical category that matches that behavior with a precision that should stop every person watching this. Because Daniel describes a class of non-human intelligence whose very name is their function. We're in Babylon, the royal court of Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel, the same prophet who described the 4 kingdoms and the 10 kings, receives a vision in which a being descends from heaven. Not an angel with a message, not a cherub carrying God's throne. A different category entirely. Daniel 4:13-17. I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and an holy one came down from heaven. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones. A watcher. The Aramaic word is IYR, one who is awake, one who watches, an observer. A being whose function is not messaging, not worship, not ground-level interaction, surveillance, watching, monitoring, reporting. The function is in the name. And here's the detail about the watchers that most people reading Daniel 4 skip entirely. Because the verse says, the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones. The watchers issue decrees. They make demands. They do not just passively observe, they observe and then act on what they observe. The watching produces judgment. The surveillance leads to a verdict. Nebuchadnezzar's downfall, the great king driven to madness, eating grass like an animal, was decreed by the watchers. The surveillance produced the sentence. Now think about what that means for the UAP behavior pattern. Objects monitoring nuclear weapon sites. Objects hovering over military installations for hours without engagement. Objects tracking the most destructive technology humanity has ever created. And observing it. Not stopping it. Not intervening. Watching. The same function Daniel described. Observation that precedes judgment. Surveillance that leads to a verdict. And here's the connection that ties the watchers to the Tennessee briefing. Because the military operators described the phenomena as monitoring. Not random, not chaotic. Systematic observation of specific sites. But the watchers are just Category 5, the surveillance function. Category 6 is the one that bridges directly into the deception the disclosure narrative is constructing. Because Category 6 describes a specific kind of non-human intelligence that should alarm every person watching this more than any other category in the entire taxonomy. An entity that volunteers to deceive, that is, permitted to deceive, and that targets the most trusted voices available. Category 6, the lying spirit, the permitted deception. Now here's Category 6, and this is the category that should change how every person watching this understands the mechanism of the disclosure narrative. Because every other category we have examined tells you what non-human intelligences are. This category tells you how the deception works. And the mechanism is more disturbing than most people are prepared to hear. Because the mechanism involves God. We're in the throne room of heaven. 1 Kings chapter 22. The prophet Micaiah is describing a vision. And the vision is the most uncomfortable passage in the entire Old Testament for people who want to believe that deception only comes from the enemy. Because in this vision, the deception comes from the throne room. Israel's king Ahab wants to go to war at Ramoth-Gilead. He asks his prophets, 400 of them, whether he should attack. And all 400 say the same thing. Go up. The Lord will deliver it into your hand. 400 voices, unanimous, confident, authoritative, and every single one of them is wrong. Micaiah, the one prophet Ahab hates because he never prophesies anything good, tells the king what he actually saw. 1 Kings 22, 19-23. And he said, Hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, Who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth-Gilead? And one said on this manner, and another said on that manner. And there came forth a spirit, and stood before the Lord, and said, I will persuade him. And the Lord said unto him, Wherewith? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, Thou shalt persuade him, and prevail also. Go forth, and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord hath put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these thy prophets, and the Lord hath spoken evil concerning thee. Detail 2. God permitted it. Go forth, and do so. The lying spirit did not escape God's control. God authorized the mission. The deception operates within God's sovereign purposes, not outside them. And here's why that matters. The strong delusion of 2 Thessalonians 2:11. God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, is the New Testament echo of 1 Kings 22. God sends the delusion, not because God is the author of deception, because God permits deception as a judgment on those who rejected the truth. The lying spirit is the Old Testament precedent for the strong delusion. The mechanism is identical. The permission is divine. The purpose is judgment. Now here's what the footage means for you. And this is the most important section in this entire video. More important than the files. More important than the Tennessee briefing. More important than the race. 3 responses. The first response: test everything against Scripture. The message behind the evidence is the test. And here's the second response. And here's why this response matters more than most people realize. Do not be afraid. 2 Timothy 1:7. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind. The footage is designed to produce 2 responses: fear and wonder. Fear makes you vulnerable. Wonder makes you open. And the combination of fear and wonder is the precise emotional state in which deception lands most effectively. The response Jesus commanded, "See that ye be not troubled," is the response that preserves discernment. The person who is afraid cannot think clearly. The person consumed by wonder cannot evaluate critically. Now here's what this video is and is not. The government files released on May 8, 2026 are publicly available at war.gov/UFO. Trump's quotes are verbatim from Truth Social. The Pentagon's statements are from official releases. The Tennessee briefing details come from public statements by confirmed attendees, Joseph Z., Alan DiDio, and others, and from Representative Burleson's own public clarifications. This video does not claim all UAP phenomena are demonic. The Tennessee briefing operators themselves said approximately 90% of sightings are advanced human technology. The remaining phenomena require discernment, not certainty. This video provides a biblical framework for evaluation, not a definitive identification of every object in the footage. And here's what you should be tracking, because the disclosure is not over. It is beginning. 6 things to watch. And the 6th is the one that matters most. Watch the Pursue releases. More tranches are coming. Track what is released and what remains classified.